Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the first multi-location meeting of the new term, and that is Cabinet on Thursday, the 16th of June at 10 a.m. First item on the agenda today is apologies for absence.
Thank you, Leader. I have one apology from Councillor Andrew Stevens.
Okay, are there any others? No. Okay, we'll move on to disclosures of personal and prejudicial interest. Are there any to declare today?
Item 10, local government authority governor appointments. I'll be leaving for that item.
Okay, thank you. Any online declarations to make? Okay, thank you, colleagues. We move on to the minutes of the previous meeting, pages 1 to 4. I've not been notified of any changes, but happy to take them if there are any. If not, can I ask you to show if you're in agreement of the minutes? Yeah, everybody? Okay, thank you. Announcements of Leader of the Council. Only one really, just to welcome all members back and specifically to welcome the new members of the Cabinet joining us today. That's Councillor Cyril Anderson and Councillor Hayley Gwilliam. They are our first official job share Cabinet members under the new legislation. And just for members to note that as a job share process, both members will be able to cast a vote in the meeting, but that vote will only be counted as one vote because Cabinet can still only cast 10 votes. So both will be able to cast a vote, but will only counted one. If there is at any time a disagreement between those members, then I'll be notified of that, and that vote will then be taken by the chair. Okay. In that respect, then we'll move on to public question time. Do we have any questions from members of the public? Okay, we'll move on to councillor question time. Are there any councillors' questions present who'd like to ask a question? Councillor Fitzgerald.
Yes, Chair, thank you. My questions were actually being directed at the absent councillor, so I'm not sure what the processes are now. If
yeah, you can ask them of me, and if I'm able to answer them, I will. If not, I'll get you a written response.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, it relates to item 8 on the agenda, and in particular paragraph 4.8, and this is in regard to the proposed active travel route along Gorsinan Road in my ward, which is, as you may already be aware, a fairly contentious proposal. My first question then is, could the Cabinet member explain how the main stakeholders in regard to this particular route along Gorsinan Road, how were they advised of the consultation process back in 2017, which is a big issue, and how the process of the council adopted at that time complied with the local government guidance, which states that a consultation is an opportunity to give local people a voice and to influence important decisions, and it involves listening to and learning from local people before decisions are made or priorities are set. So my issue is, how was this consultation process conducted in regard to this particular route, as the community council weren't informed, I wasn't informed, and obviously none of the residents. Then the second question is, given that I'm now being told that the decision for the route was agreed in 2017, could I have a response to the query, in fact, I've already put to Transportation, which is that in September 2019, I made a query about the route that was going to be used for Pentlegare. I put this in an email following some reference to a potential route in some Cabinet papers. I put this in an email to an officer who has since left the authority, and I asked where was the route going to go through Pentlegare to Gorsinan. And the answer I had was the project of this year's design and feasibility works is undergoing, and that the council does not therefore have a recommended position with regard to the route as yet. So obviously, on the basis of that statement, I made the assumption that the route through Pentlegare, exactly where it was going, had not yet been determined. So why was I misled? Apparently, why was I provided with this information, which gave an entirely different perception of the situation? And then question number 3, I looked at the integrated assessment screening form in relation to this particular item, and it does seem to suggest that active travel schemes will have a high impact in regard to disability. Now, I'd like to understand what exactly this means, and obviously, from my perspective, when you have to cross the road to get to your car because you can no longer park outside your property, and you may have no off-road parking or very limited off-road parking, and you have a disability, then crossing a very busy road is going to present problems and challenges and risks. So I would like to have some more clarity around this high impact in regard to disabilities. So, and finally, I just wondered, and this is a difficult one to ask in this context, if the Cabinet member would be willing to meet with residents living on Gorsinan Road to hear their concerns and to try to give them personally some explanations as to how we have got to the situation we're now in, when they knew nothing about the proposals until last year. And it was I who had to inform them initially and not the council. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Fitzgerald. In Councillor Stephen's absence, I'll try and give a general answer to cover, I think, the core of what you're asking underneath each of those questions. In terms of the 2017 consultation, my understanding was that the whole network map was provided out there with a general consultation on that at that time. I believe it went to all members for comment. And certainly there were opportunities for people to comment at that time. And again, I'm sure we can resurface the information on that and share that with you. In terms of what's happening now, we are moving now to the more detailed phase of delivery. And again, as you will appreciate, the programme for the creation of the active travel and walking routes across Swansea is to create a connected network. And that is why you cannot deliver it all at once. There isn't the funding to do it all at once. It's a multi-year process covering up to 15 years, and that's what the original map alluded to. What we've been successful in this year is a further extension of those routes, and now that those routes are funded by Welsh Government following feasibility work, then we can now move to look at the detailed design and detailed delivery of those routes. That will include further consultation and further engagement with communities. So I'm sure there will be a further opportunity for people to feed in their views in that. And of course, as we found elsewhere, there will be no doubt input from residents to ensure that the route is something that they are content with and feel that they've had an input into. I do not believe that the officers would genuinely mislead you, and I've not seen the response, but I assume what the officer was doing was relaying the information at the time, which is that we have a network ambition for Swansea, and that we were in the process of bidding for and agreeing the detail around each part of that network. And I'm sure that's what the response refers to. But again, if you're happy to share the response with me, I'm more than happy to look further into that. I will ask for further written information to be provided to you in terms of the disability impacts I'm sure that that is a sensible piece of information that could be shared. In terms of the cabinet member meeting, well, as I said, in terms of the further engagement, I'm sure there will be meetings with members where both officers and cabinet members will want to be involved, but I will certainly pass that request on to Councillor Stephens and ask him if he will consider attending. Okay.
Chairman, Leader, I wonder if I can ask on this subject a very simple question. If there is a cycleway provided, a cycle path, are cyclists obliged to use them, or can they still use the highway?
I don't think they're compelled to use them. I think they still have the opportunity, as everybody else would, to use the public highway.
Because there is a growing concern amongst the motoring fraternity, I know, that we are providing an enormous amount of active travel, which is right enough to do with that. But then there seems to be an element of the cycling fraternity that regard them as, well, they're there, but we want to use the road. And I think there is a growing resentment amongst the motoring public that if we're spending all this money on them, then use them.
Yeah, I think, look, as the network gets closer and closer to completion, and you can get to nearly every location in Swansea via a safe cycling route, then more and more cyclists will choose to do that. But of course, the network isn't complete at the moment, so people have no option often than to use the public highway in order to cycle. So, we will encourage people to do that, and that's why it's important that we progress with the consultation engagement of communities, a safe, active travel and cycling route network across Swansea. We should be very proud of what we've already achieved, because we have a substantial network already in place, but it's not complete yet. Okay, I'm going to move now to the next item on the agenda, which, if I just bring up my report. Thanks, Hugh. Okay, the next item is the Scrutiny Inquiry into Procurement. I welcome Councillor Holly to give us the scrutiny feedback on this one. So, Councillor Holly.
Thank you, Leader. I think as a sort of introduction to this about why it was done, why we had this inquiry panel, I think it's really important. I'm not going to go, certainly not going to go through the whole report, which is over 30 pages long. I think it's very important that members understood that procurement isn't just about buying. It doesn't mean that you go into shop and just buy something. It is a process, and a process which, to use the words of a former minister and a former member of the Assembly from Swansea West, Andrew Davis, we wanted to highlight how much of the Welsh pound can be spent locally, but on top of that, to get the best value for money out of that money that we as a council spend. In doing that, we recognise the fact that as a council, we procure across such a wide spectrum of issues, from social services, procuring residential care, domiciliary care, etc., right down to actually buying sand and cement or timber or office equipment. So it's such a wide spectrum that it did take quite a lot of examination. And then on top of that, part of that procurement exercise is looking at how we gain benefits out of our construction and how we gain benefits for local firms, and by using the council's beyond bricks and mortar to ensure employment opportunities for younger people and for older people is made available. So as you can see, it was an extensive inquiry. I'll come back to the conclusions, if I may, Leader. I think there's an issue about how we selected this. I think a lot of people, and I think including school governors who have an input into this, thought that many members didn't understand what that procurement process was about, how we as a council operate that. So I think in selecting the topic, it was a question of getting information and spreading that information right across the whole of the elected members. But actually, it was also quite important to make sure that other parts of this council understood that procurement was a method by which not only did we secure the best value for money, but also the safest products and the safest services that we could as a council. I think if you look on page 12, the contributed, we looked at our council perspective to the issue. We had public and stakeholders intervention, and we've done quite a lot of interviews. Evidence, we collected evidence right across the board from cabinet members, audit, roundtable meetings with stakeholders, and also with outside companies. Conclusions, I won't go into, as I say, I won't go into all of the conclusions, but what I would like to point out to the cabinet is that we came up with a couple of quick wins, which we think would be ideal for cabinet to look at and possibly implement in the not too distant future. I will find that page when I possibly can. Right. On page 28, our recommendations that we need to operate within the legal frameworks that we have, and we understand that because of leaving the European Union and the fact that we no longer have to advertise certain contracts in the OJEC, which is the European thing, European advertising for services, that we then confine ourselves to the UK. But we understand that that could change as well. So we would say we have to stay within the legal requirements. Long-term challenges, well, they're there for members to read. And one of the things that did come out about was the use of nature-based solutions in procurement practice. What that actually meant was mainly to do with weed killers, and also in our aim to look at flood prevention. One of the things that we did look at was to see how we could introduce flood prevention without building huge concrete barriers, which I must admit was very difficult and time consuming, which, to be perfectly honest, I don't think is relevant in this part of the world. It might be relevant where they've got crumbling cliffs, like Norfolk, where you plant more grass and trees and what have you, but I don't think we need to worry about that too much around the Gower Peninsula with its limestone rocks and that type of thing. The medium term, we need to have a mechanism to measure the impact of spending on policy commitments. And that should be done through a scrutiny, which I'm going on to later, a scrutiny function which really needs to investigate if we are buying X from Y provider, how is that the best option? And then the quick wins are the ones that we would like you all to actually implement. And the first one is open days, encouraging local firms to tender for council works. We understand there is a problem about the size of contracts where that is concerned. And that is an issue when I'll come on to a little bit later on. But one of the things that we did feel is, do we need to have these large contracts, or is it a way working with our people who want these contracts, building services or social services? It's a way we could make them smaller and get more local people involved. We also consider a working group be created for education procurement and representatives in schools and the council's procurement team. This is one area where we felt there could be a quick win. And the reason being is we all know that the delegated budgets in schools, and we're all school governors and we understand how those budgets work. But it would be, we think, beneficial if we had a scrutiny function to look at how education procurement, with the help of the school governors and the schools generally, and our council procurement team, how that could work. On page 30, we mentioned, and this was actually right across the board, everybody accepted that we need really to have a look at procurement and how it fits into the scrutiny work programme. When we have the scrutiny the work programme board, we will be looking at this to see how we can fit it in. In closing, I'd like to, like to say and like to thank the number of people that were involved. There is a list there on page 31. Hopefully I haven't missed anyone, and we haven't missed anyone at all, but it's all the cabinet members. A special thanks to Chris Williams, Head of Commercial Services, for his patience and understanding, and to Adam and to Brian Rolls, and also to Martin. It has been a very lengthy process, and one thing we did find very interesting was the fact that our partners in like Days Fleet, Business Wales, and LBS Building Services were more than happy to come to our roundtable discussion, and we're quite happy to be involved in the procurement scrutiny. And I'd also like to thank the panel and Michelle Morris and Leader. Thank you very much for your attention, and I hope that you can accept all of what we put in this paper. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Holly, and can I thank you and the panel for the work that they've done, but I'll ask Councillor Hopkins to formally respond on behalf of Cabinet.
Yeah, can I start by thanking yourself, Councillor Holly, for the good work you put into this. One thing you have raised, particularly for me, is the awareness and of the wider awareness with council, and I think it was very important that it actually raised the profile, certainly what we do in procurement. I think when you weigh up everything that has gone on between Brexit, the pandemic, when this scrutiny panel were looking at this, was probably one of the most difficult times we were going through. It lasted several months, and the outcomes, I think, has been absolutely fantastic. When you look at what our ambitions are, where we've been, and what we are trying to do with our local spend, and what we don't do is demonstrate that enough. When we did look at the Preston example and look for externally, I think there's a lesson to be learned that what we don't do is sing our praises. We've got a very, very small team that procures very professionally, and I think biggest risk in this own council is probably in procurement. I feel more comfortable now than I ever did after actually having this scrutiny inquiry panel. And I think one of the quick wins we could do is have a training session as well for the wider council on the function of procurement right throughout the authority, not just in education. I think that would benefit particularly new members as well, because procurement matters. When you look at the Wellbeing Act and the Future Generations Act, this is all it's about, looking for local solutions, and we are on this. And I take on point, one of the quick wins was holding more and more. More and more open days and more partnership working with Business Wales. We were doing that. We were on that thing, and then Brexit hit us. So we've got a very ambitious plan to look at the SMEs to work with us to build that capacity. And I take on board some of the points out of this. There's some really good, interesting findings here, but there was no surprises for me. I think we were on that road anyway. What I will do, Councillor, is obviously give you the formal written responses within the timescale. But I would like to put on my thanks to Michelle for all the work that she did, particularly looking externally, and the partners that come on board. When you're talking about the Council for Voluntary Services, Days Fleet, LBS, lots of people come to give their time to say how good we are, how we work with people. That, to me, give me some reassurances, of where we are. And I would also, again, like to thank Chris Williams for all his input. But it was, in my opinion, it's a very, very good, comprehensive thing that did last several months, you are right, but it did raise the awareness. So thank you very much for that, and I will give you that written response in the timescale. Thanks.
Well, thank you, colleagues. So we'll note that report. Oh, sorry, Councillor Andrea Lewis. Councillor Lewis, if you'd like to come in.
Yes, please. Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to highlight, sorry, there's a little bit of feedback. I can hear duplication. I don't know if you can hear me twice.
Sound is fine in the room. Can I ask everybody else to make sure they're on mute, please, and those online as well, please, if you can make sure you're on mute whilst Councillor Lewis is speaking. Councillor Lewis?
Thank you. It might just be my end. Yeah, I just wanted to highlight the excellent work. I know Councillor Hopkins referred to us already being in quite a positive position and already being on this journey. We did take careful consideration of our building our new homes, council home sites, Parker Helig and Colliesway 2, and the goods and services in terms of the local supply chains. There was an 80 to 85% procurement within a 30-mile radius of those sites, and a 90 to 95% procurement within a 50-mile radius of those sites. Not only does that obviously support local businesses and local supply chains, but critically reduces the carbon footprint in terms of constructing those sites. So there is some excellent work which is ongoing, which we will continue to build on. But this report really does highlight the importance of local procurement and the opportunities in terms of supporting our local economy that it can bring. So we'll continue to do that in terms of our council home sites. But I was, really interested to read through the findings of this report, particularly as climate change lead. And I hope that there are solutions we are feeding in to Welsh Government in terms of the measurement of our carbon emissions and our carbon reduction work. And I hope that that will also be taken into account in terms of the radius of where we procure from in terms of our carbon emissions. So just highlighting that really, that we're not quite there yet, but we want some common sense and a logical approach to reduce, our reduction of carbon emissions and the measurement of that.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Lewis. And as you and Councillor Hopkins said, I think I know Welsh Government looked at the Preston model and were holding that up as an example of really good practice. But actually, I think they missed a trick, because there are very good examples of procurement here in Wales, and I have encouraged Welsh Government to look closer to home in terms of what's going on in local government, because there is a lot that we can share across Wales, which is as good as, if not better than, what they'd seen up in Preston. And I think some of the examples both you and Councillor Hopkins and the panel have identified stand us in good stead for that. So thank you very much for that. I now will move on to agenda item 8, which is the financial procedure rule. There's a vote on this one, is there? Apologies.
I'll just launch the vote now, Leader. Okay. Does anybody need to vote verbally? Councillor Hopkins. For any others? Councillor Rob Francis Davis. Any other votes needed to be cast verbally? Councillor William, sorry, and Councillor Anderson. Okay, any other votes verbally? No. Okay, I should just close the poll then. And that's unanimous for, Leader.
Thank you all very much, colleagues. So that item is carried. We'll move now on to the next item, which is Financial Procedure Rule 7, item 8, which is the Local Transport Fund and Active Travel Fund grants for both 22-23. In Councillor Stephen's absence, I'll just rattle through the report. You have 3 recommendations to consider today, which are on page 36. That relates to the approval for the grant funding applications, but also designation for the assigned Cabinet Member, Councillor Stevens, and the Director of PACE to bid and accept any bids that come through, and then the approved capital schemes be added to our capital programme. So if you go forward to section 2.1, you'll see there the table of the bids that we submitted back in January this year. And as I said in earlier response to Councillor Fitzgerald, who's now left, obviously we can't guarantee funding for all of the bids that we put in, but we've done extremely well. And if you go forward in the report up to section, let me just get it, here, so section 5, which covers the successful funding awards for routes. You'll see that we've been successful in attracting £8.325 million. That includes both feasibility and deliverability awards. And again, as I said to Councillor Fitzgerald, this is a multi-stage process, and some of the awards that we have within this list are for feasibility work for routes that we would hope to deliver subject to further funding from Welsh Government. But you'll see the list there. There's grants towards further work on the South West Wales Metro, which is obviously something that we have as a priority. Work on Swansea Valley Bus Pilot, sustainable transport improvements, regional bus core allocation, the Swansea North strategic route, city centre links, Swansea Valley links, West Swansea links, and a core allocation as well of 1.1 million. So as I said previously, we've got a very strong record, a very proud record of delivering safe, active travel and cycling and walking routes across Swansea. We have a network to rival many European capitals, and this will only add to that. So again, I'll refer you back to the recommendations I mentioned earlier, which are on page 36, the 3 recommendations there. Happy to take questions or comments. If not, Mr. Evans, we'll go to the vote.
Thank you, Leader. The vote has been shared. Does anybody need to vote verbally? Councillor Hopkins, Councillor Rothfuss-Davies, for any others? Councillor Anderson, for. Okay, excellent. Okay, any others needing to vote? Okay, I shall close the poll then. And that's unanimous for, Leader.
Thank you very much, colleagues. So we'll move to the next item. Let me just get the page. So the next item is the report of Cabinet Member again for Environment and Infrastructure, which is the Community Budgets report. And again, apologies, but as Councillor Stevens isn't here, I'll take that report as well. As members will know, we, as an authority, introduced bigger community budgets some time ago. Those were set at £10,000 per councillor per year, and that allowed the councillor, the elected member or members, to deliver on priorities for their community. It placed a significant sum of money directly under political control so that members were able to respond to deliver on the priorities of their communities. Members have been hugely successful in doing that across the authority over the last few years, but of course we hadn't revisited the community budget scheme for some time, and we needed to make some changes. You have 2 recommendations there on page 66, which cover the appendices, but also the delegated authority for changes to guidelines to the Director of Police, Director of Finance and the relevant Cabinet member. In terms of the changes in the report itself, there are some significant ones, the most significant, I guess, being the increase in the budgets, because we know that cost of materials, cost of labour, etc. has increased over the period. So now councillors will be able to avail themselves of £15,000 per member per year. That is a 50% increase in the available budget, which will hopefully help them meet the needs of future schemes. In addition to that, we've done some strengthening of the procedures around the spend of community budgets, making sure that procurement of services is on a robust footing. And again, as we discussed earlier, making sure that we do whatever we can to encourage sensible spend locally wherever possible. So again, very, very pleased to see this report here today. Thank Councillor Stevens for the work that he's done on this report, along with officers, to make sure that we have a revised community budget scheme that I think will support members in delivering for their communities. With that, I'll move the recommendations. Could I ask for a seconder, please?
Yeah, happy to be honest, happy to second that, but I've got to say it actually puts, members close to the community. It empowers them to spend money locally. Historically, it's always been very, very difficult to get little projects off the ground in the community and help small little groups. Even with £1,000 or £2,000, the difference you can make is massive. So this increase is so welcome by us as councillors, particularly me and my ward. It'll make a massive difference to getting them events, locally events procured properly. And I do welcome some of the changes made, ensuring that we come in that. So, Leader, I can only say thank you very much for allowing us, to develop this scheme and try to get more and more spent locally in our community. So, big thanks from me, and I also second the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. Councillor Francis Davis.
Yes, I welcome this. I can remember years ago the word subsidiarity, and this actually makes decision making far closer to the communities we are there to represent, and I think that's extremely important. I like the strengthening on the procurement side of, we just had a long discussion on procurement, but I think it is important. This is public money that we are seen to be open, transparent and accountable for the money that we spend. And so I welcome the strengthening of that. And I think it's a very good report and really happy to support, Leader. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other comments on this report? If not, I'll ask Mr. Evans to launch the vote, please.
Thank you, Leader. The vote has been launched. I'll take verbal votes. Councillor Hopkins. Councillor Francis Davis. Any other councillors wishing to vote? Okay, excellent. Do you need any more time, or shall I close the vote? I'll close the poll then. And that's unanimous for. Thank you.
Okay, we come to item 10, our final item, and Councillor Smith has declared an interest in this item, so we'll give him 2 minutes just to leave the room. Okay, colleagues, again, given that Councillor Smith has had to declare an interest on this item, I'll take this item in his absence. I'll be very brief. Local governor appointments. Like many of you, you will know people listed on the list there for recommendation. I'm not declaring interest as I don't have a close personal relationship with any of them. But I've nothing really to add to the report other than to recommend the recommendation on page 94. Could I ask for a seconder, please?
Happy to second.
Thank you very much. Any comments or questions? If not, again, I'll ask Mr. Evans to launch the vote.
Thank you, Leader. The vote has been launched. Verbal votes. Councillor Hopkins. Councillor Francis Davis. Any other verbal votes? No. I shall close the poll. And that is unanimous for, Leader.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Evans. Thank you, colleagues. And with that, that's our final item. So thank you all for your attendance. I declare the meeting closed. Thank you.